Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltore, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. I have been featuring over the last year Les Filles du Roi, the King's Daughter, but today I'm starting a new episode, a new series called Les Filles Mariées, and we're going to get to know all about Les Filles Mariées very shortly. Before I begin, let me share with you ways that you can support my channel. The first three keep you in the loop: subscribe, like, and notify. And the next three are ways to help the channel grow. It is coffee. They have coffee, Etsy, and Patreon. Are all ways of showing your support. So I've provided links below and all of that good stuff. So let's get started in this brand new #1 episode of Les Filles Mariées. And so we come to Les Filles Mariées. And these are the ladies who came before. They're the grandmothers, in a sense, of much of Quebec. And so this is, if you have a fille mariée, and most of us do, in your lineage, you know that you are among the pioneers of the very earliest New France. And Les Filles Mariées was not a collective group as Les Filles du Roi. They mostly came one or two at a time. Each year, this is a long period of time. We have almost, 30 years here of girls coming, 28 years, and yet only 262 came. So some years there was one, some years around the 1650s we start seeing much more. Certainly there was one that started in 1634 that I'll be doing shortly, but as the first one, if you will. But the filles mariées, they had to meet criteria. So you couldn't be a fille mariée if you came with your parents. You had to come alone. You had to be of marriageable age, between 18 and 45. You could not already have a spouse waiting for you in Quebec. You literally had to have some sort of contract that you signed either in France or, upon coming to New France. So these were very different girls, and you're going to see how they came from different places they were not Parisian, many of them, and came from the countryside. So these were a hardier stock, and are truly amazing women. So once we get to know them, you're going to see the evolution of Quebec and how and why, even though they did the best they could, they couldn't in that small a number actually populate Quebec. So that is why Les Filles du Roi came. But this was the very, very beginning of trying to create a country from nothing. So let's get to know the very first lady that I selected to our Filles du Roi episode 1. For my very first episode, I chose one of my great-grandmothers, Catherine Isabelle Saint-Père. She's one of mine, the boy next door. That I grew up with, that was his great-grandmother, and one of my dear, dear teenage friends, that was also her great-grandmother. I know that I've met some of the amazing, amazing ladies here on Facebook and that sort of thing, that is their lineage as well. So let's get to know Catherine and all that she brought to New France. So Catherine was born in 1634 in Saint-Jean d'Angely, which is a commune. A commune, remember, regular viewers know a commune means a township or small village in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of France. The commune was founded in the 9th century as an abbey to house an artifact of St. John the Baptist. And it was rebuilt in the 14th, 17th, and 18th century. And that's the church that I believe Catherine would have been baptized in, and that is also kind of just what it looks like today, and just wanted you to get a kind of a lay of the land of where this amazing woman comes from. Catherine came with her sister Jeanne, and sometime in 1647. Their mother, which is kind of an unusual situation, was also a fille mariée because she decided she wanted to explore New France. So she was young enough to still qualify as a fille mariée. So all three of them came to New France, and particularly the area of New France that they settled would be forever changed because of their presence. The groom that she selected, his name was Maître Guillet de la Jeunesse, and he was born sometime in 1625 in the region of La Rochelle in France. His parents were François Guillet and Perrine Ménard. And let's talk a little bit about La Rochelle, which is such an important place in the history of New France and of France. And La Rochelle was founded during the 10th century and became an important harbor in the 12th. Until the 15th century, La Rochelle was to be the largest French harbor, dealing mainly in wine, salt, and cheese. You can't get much better than that. The name was first recorded in 961 AD as Rupella, from a Latin which meant little rock. La Rochelle has been one of the richest history of all the towns of France. From its beginnings in an area where the Knights of Templar had their strongest base. Eleanor married Henry Plantagenet in 1152, who would become King of England as Henry II in 1154, thus putting La Rochelle under Plantagenet rule, Protestants, until Louis VIII captured it in the 1224 siege of La Rochelle. During the British control of the city, Henry II had the Vauclair castle built, remains of which are still visible in the Place de Verdun. From 1568, La Rochelle became a center for Huguenots. It was in La Rochelle that the Protestant Revolution occurred and created the uprising that would become known as the Siege of La Rochelle. Throughout the 1600s, the Huguenots were expelled from La Rochelle. And so every time I see La Rochelle in a New France profile, I always wonder, was there a Protestant connection? Was there a reason they were, or were they just escaping because they needed to just go into a place where there was no fighting? But it is a fact that many of the New France and Filles du Roi certainly were Protestants, and some of the grooms that they married. So certainly the fact that the Guillets were from this area and at this time gives us an idea that, you know, they were certainly affected by the Huguenots. And also, I always want to point out that, you know, La Rochelle and the people that escaped from there would go on to not only influence New France, but in New York, for example, you may remember on the Dick Van Dyke Show, they lived in New Rochelle and La Rochelle, and that's where it comes from. So just gives you an idea of the impact over the many hundreds of years of how a small thing still affects us today. So Catherine would marry Maître in Trois-Rivières sometime in 1648. We do not have any documents for that time. And that's what you're going to find in this particular series. Those of you who have followed or are still following the Filles du Roi, we have a lot more documentation. So when we're going to be able to have documents in this particular series, it's going to be kind of like, oh, wow, we have something. So let's, they got married. So let's see what transpired. Their happiness was very short-lived because Maître was killed by the Iroquois on August 18th, 1652. She was a widow now at 18. Just amazing. So the groom that kind of rescues her, his name is, and who she rescues too. Nicolas Rivard de Lavigne is his name. He was born in 1617 in a place called Tourovre in France. His parents were Pierre Rivard and Jeanne Mulat. I want to show you, he's part of the Normandy region in the Orne département. And you can see here that the church that he would have been baptized in, Saint-Aubin, it still stands. And then there is a monument to all the Canadians who were baptized here. And guess what? There's Nicolas. And this particular region of France was really renowned in terms of the immigration. It has been stated that nearly all French Canadians have some ancestors from villages of this area. And, you know, some of the more prominent names, including Rivard, but we also have names such as Côté, Boucher, Cloutier, Dion, Tremblay, Pere, among many, many others. And so it's important to study this region because this is kind of the roots of it all. So let's have a look at Nicolas' journey and what what brought him to New France. So Nicolas enlisted to come to New France in 1648. Can you imagine? It wasn't even a country. I mean, it was just nothing. He signed a contract for 3 years at a salary of 66 livres, pounds, per year. He also had a bonus. This little picture here is obviously not a picture of Nicolas Rival. It comes from the famous, our French-Canadian ancestor, Thomas J. Laforêt. And I just thought I just love to have some kind of visual in my head. And so I kind of popped it over there. So Nicolas and Catherine were married sometime in 1652 or 1653. Again, we have no records. But this was, you can imagine, it was truly the frontier. So let's get to know the Rivals, who were pioneers in Trois-Rivières. Let's get to know Trois-Rivières a little bit better. You can see on the map here where I've circled, it's kind of in between Montreal and Quebec City. So on the south side, the other side of the St. Lawrence. But I want to give you a little bit of a historical element of this amazing place because it was really only, you had Quebec City and then you had Trois-Rivières. It was named Trois-Rivières because the St. Maurice River has 3 channels that form at the mouths of the St. Lawrence River. Trois-Rivières is French for 3 rivers. It was known for 3 rivers for a long time in North America, but as the French regained control of their province, the French version, Trois-Rivières, overtook it. So now in Quebec, we do not call it 3 rivers. We call it Trois-Rivières. But my parents and grandparents called it 3 rivers. So it's kind of interesting. My English side of my family. But Trois-Rivières is very strategic, and it actually proved to be very, very, very important in the battle for the American Revolution. There is a battle called La Bataille de Trois-Rivières, or 3 Rivers. Some of you may be surprised that you have ancestors that would qualify you for admission into the Daughters of the American Revolution. So you can see here where Trois-Rivières is in relationship to Montreal and Quebec. You can also, I love this map. This is like one of my favorite ones. And there is Nicolas Rival's land. It faces the St. Lawrence, of course. And he's got quite a bit of land, okay? So, because he was one of the early pioneers. So we have him on this. This is what's so great about Les Filles Mariées, because we're going to be able to see them throughout the, there's going to be a couple of census usually that they will be available to see. So we have the 1666 census with the entire family. We have the 1667 census, which is a little bit easier to read. And at the very, very end, we have him and his Catherine. She was quite a bit younger than him. All the children. They actually had a domestic that worked with them, which is an unusual thing. And they had 5 beasts or, some sort of animals. He had 25 arpents. So they had 25, approximately 20 acres of land. So that's a lot in that time. And this picture on the top is actually what Trois-Rivières looks like today. I mean, it's still got that really, I mean, there's very modern parts of it too, don't get me wrong. But there is still that essential pioneer spirit in Trois-Rivières. So this is a place that next summer I plan on traveling through. So we'll see. I have been there many times, but haven't been in many, many years. So can't wait to go back. So the Rivals would eventually settle at Batiscan, which is a little bit up north from Trois-Rivières. It was obviously very fertile land. The history of Batiscan begins with our old friend Champlain, who met up with a native named Batiscan in 1609, and by 1612 he had named this area Batisquam. In 1636, the seigneurie was granted to Jacques Laferté, at which time it was called Madeleine. By 1639, it was divvied up again and given to the Jesuits. Hence, the area did not grow until about 1666 when settlers began to arrive. So guess what? Nicolas Rival decided to become a pioneer yet again. Prior to 1670, the inhabitants met. They met at the home of Nicolas Rival de Lavigne, um, for church services, that sort of thing. So he was very, very influential. A wooden chapel is constructed sometime between 1670 and 1674. And finally, the parish of Saint François Xavier de Batica is formed in 1684. So they were there right at the beginning. I mean, you can't get there. It's just amazing. And I'm very proud of that. And again, we will be visiting Batica in our summer trip. Now we have the 1681 census posted up there. We have Nicolas is now 60. Catherine, 45. And then their children are still living with him. We have Nicolas, Jeanne, Julien, François, Pierre, Madeleine, Michel, Jean, Catherine, Antoine. They have 4 guns, 5 bêtes à cornes, and in this area they still have 25 arpents. So I suspect he sold his land into Trois-Rivières, possibly, or kept it, but now he has 25 acres of land in that area as well. So just amazing, amazing pioneer spirit that I'm very proud of. So they would have a total of 10 children. Nicolas would marry Elisabeth Protier, with whom he had 5 children, all of whom made it. He then married François Marier, with whom he had 3 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Their son Pierre is one of my great-grandfathers. Marie-Jeanne married Charles Dutot and had 13 children, 11 of whom made it to adulthood. Julien married Elizabeth Tournay de Dufresne and had 13 children, 10 of whom made it to adulthood. Their daughter, Marie-Elisabeth, is my 7 times great-grandmother. François married Madeleine Lepelle and had 7 children, 4 of whom made it. He then married Geneviève Shine and had 5 children, all of whom made it to adulthood, and 3 of these children are my great-grandparents. Pierre married Catherine Troitier, whose sister Elizabeth married Nicolas, and had 5 children, all of whom made it. Marie-Madeleine married Pierre Lafont, and de la Montgray, and had 12 children, 8 of whom made it. 2 of their daughters are my great-grandmothers. Michel passed away at a young age, and we have Jean-Baptiste, who married Geneviève Trottier and had 9 children, 7 of whom made it to adulthood. Marie-Catherine married Alexis Marchand and had 2 children, both of whom made it. Antoine married Marie Briand and had 6 children, 4 of whom made it to adulthood. This is an interesting story and a branch. This branch is the Louisiana part. Antoine was there as an engagé, and Marie came from Paris around 1704 as one of the basket girls who were sent to the southern United States, which at the time, as you know, was a French colony. So those of you who have that descendancy, please put the comments below, because I'm fascinated by all of that Louisiana connection. Nicolas would pass away on July 1st, 1701, at the age of 84. But don't think that he went, feebly into that good night. As late as 1697, he was still acting, in the militia, and at 81, I think they said, where I read. So, I mean, he was a strong, strong man. Catherine would follow him 8 years later, and they are both buried at Batica. Together, they created an incredible legacy. As of 1729, they had 244 descendants who multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. What was interesting in my analysis is what I'm going to show you next. Part of understanding French Canadians and understanding your heritage, and this applies in every genealogical search, if you will, is understanding the names and how they change and how they're spelled and all of that. But with French Canadians, remember those D, also known as, especially when you're dealing with a family as old in terms of they're being here in North America, they would have evolved and changed over time as they migrated to America. that sort of thing. So I just want you, I'm not going to read them all, but I want you to just look at the number of variations of this name. You can pause and freeze frame this and kind of look and see if there's anything, but certainly La Vigne and Rivard, would have not only been, Rivard could be La Vigne could be Rivard, they could be called all kinds of names, Brodard, Boursier, even Lauranger, because other names, other people with that name Rivard would have done a D name, and then that D name could become part of another cycle of family. So you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to the origin of whatever name it is. So if you see a name like I'm going to take it, Rivac, R-V-I-C, that's probably not a French-Canadian name. So you have to try to figure out, where did that come from? What part of the branch of the family? So, and I got this in China. I don't often do this, but this was just too good. And it comes from page 222 from our French-Canadian ancestors, Thomas J. Laforêt, in the volume that deals with Nicolas Rivard. So just wanted to share that with you. Love just being able to figure out, who's who, a rose by any other name. So of course, as you know, I always try to feature any kind of association or special tribute, and l'Association des Familles Rivard is right there. So I'm going to share the info with you in the notes in terms of the address to go on there and find out the information. So please check that out. It seems like a very, very vibrant association, which doesn't surprise me, knowing Les Rivards, I also wanted to share something that's new, and it's on Facebook, the Rivard Family History Project. That's a private group, so you have to request membership, but it is an association, or a group, if you will, not an association, a group that was founded recently, and really, I think, really a remarkable tribute to Nicolas. So have a look at that if this is your ancestry. And last but not least, I wanted to kind of show some resources that I think would be very, very good. As you know, on the Fille du Roi, I always indicate these kind of resources. I want to show you the Quebec Genealogical E-Society, the Généalogie Québec, and Nos Origines, Généalogie du Québec et d'Amérique française. These are amazing websites you need to explore. One that I haven't talked a lot about, and I should, is Maple Stars and Stripes. Sandra Goodwin is kind of an idol of mine because of all she has done in terms of just educating and informing and empowering people. Her podcasts are what kept me going during the pandemic. I found them during the pandemic, and she kind of inspired me to kind of look within and see what I can accomplish, and that was kind of the genesis of trying to figure out this YouTube. So I can thank Sandra for that. Please have a look at Maple Stars and Stripes. And then the 4 other ones I've done are the Quebec Family History Society, the French Canadian Heritage Society of Michigan, very good society, and the American French Genealogical Society, and American Canadian Genealogical Society. So I put all of the links for you to explore and kind of get to know. And if I'm missing one, or one that you really think would be essential, of course I didn't put Ancestry and Family Search and all that, because everyone knows that. I really wanted to focus on the other kind of resources that we can find. So if anybody has any other resources you'd like me to add as we're starting this series, please let me know. And with that, we end our very first episode of Catherine Saint-Père and Nicolas Rivard. And I'm so thrilled to be finally able to move into Les Filles Mariées and really start diving in. Number 2 episode is going to feature, you wouldn't be surprised, Jeanne Saint-Père. So we're going to further explore these sisters and really get to know them as well. So with that being said, I want to thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all your support, and I will see you on episode 2 of Les Filles Mariées. Until then, au revoir.